Hi there everyone, it's Sue here from Checking My English, and in this video lesson we're looking at how your language choices and tone of voice might affect your relationships at work. So I wonder if you're finding it difficult to develop relationships with colleagues. You might make an innocent request but seem to notice there's a hostile and resentful look in their eyes, and you wonder why they're being so unfriendly. You're left feeling as if you don't quite fit in and you don't know what the heck's going on. So if you've experienced or are experiencing any of the above, then you may not like me saying this, but it's possible that the problem could be you, not them. It may be that the way that you're phrasing things, the language you use, your tone of voice might be alienating people rather than endearing you to other people. But you might cry, but I was only trying to do my job properly. Perhaps the language you use sounds a bit too formal or bossy, and people feel that you're being officious, so they don't warm to you. If you aren't the boss, or even if you are, they aren't going to respond very well. Or it may be that the tone of your voice is the problem. It may be that you're inadvertently conveying a mood that you don't intend, and that will have an adverse effect on your listener. Language choices, style, and tone all combine subtly to give a message that may lead to a very different effect from what you intended and cause a glitch in your working relationships. Another thing you need to consider is your status in the relationship. So, are you an equal? Are you the boss? Or are you a subordinate in the relationship? Only a boss is entitled to give orders. An equal or a subordinate is not. And again, our tone and the kind of language we use, the forms we use, vary depending on our status in this relationship hierarchy. Just to give you an example, I recently received an email from a prospective client who was requesting a service from me. She wanted me to do something as a favour for her. And she said to me, "Please remember to check your email." Now, I knew she hadn't meant to be impolite, but my immediate reaction was, "Don't tell me what to do." And of course, I only thought this and didn't say anything, because it's embarrassing to correct someone, isn't it? If we assume agreement, that can be another mistake. And on another occasion, a client wanted to ask me for an appointment to be rescheduled at the last minute, and this was quite inconvenient for me. But instead of her using a polite request form to ask if this was okay, she made the suggestion, "Let's change to tomorrow," assuming that it was equally okay with me. And again, she didn't mean to be rude, but her language choice left me feeling slightly annoyed. In a previous job, I had a Korean boss, and apologies to any Koreans who might be watching this. She once asked me to correct a very small detail on a fairly unimportant notice on the staff notice board, and the mistake hadn't been made by me, I hasten to add. What she said was, "Please update that notice," in a very flat tone. If she'd said it like this, "Could you just update that notice, please?" I would have done it quite happily. But instead, she just made me feel like a naughty child who'd been told off. So it's official. It's in English, we say please and thank you statistically more often than any other culture. Doesn't make us any more polite than other cultures. In fact, we definitely aren't. But to us, it's a necessary way of showing good manners. However, this isn't enough in itself. If we want someone whom we don't know very well to do something for us, we have to use polite request forms as well if we want to maintain their goodwill. And how do we know how to make a request sound polite and not like an order? Well, that's by using these verbs, these modal verbs such as could and would. Consider the differences here. And I'm using traffic light colours to show you that red means stop, i.e. don't use this form. Amber to show that it might be okay in certain circumstances. And green if it's good to go. So let's look at the examples now. Get me the sales figures for last week. This is a definite no-no. It sounds like an order. Could you get me the sales figures for last week, please? So this form uses a modal verb, could, and please. It's a much more polite form. Compare these two. Send out the staff survey today. Still sounds a bit abrupt. Please send out the staff survey form today. Again, even though we're using the word please, it still sounds something like an order or a direction. This one's a bit better. I'd like you to send out the staff survey form today, please. Now, this is a great form to use if you're the boss and you're giving an instruction or a direction. It's polite and it's clear. It uses I'd like, so we're using a modal verb, and it uses please. So that's pretty good. But this one is even better. Could you please send out the staff survey form today? And that's got a really nice form and tone to it. But it's not just the words that we say, but the way that we say it, which is important. In English pronunciation, a flat or falling tone makes you sound rude, even if you don't mean to be. You need to keep your tone light and use a rising or a rise and fall pattern. Our native language sometimes might be very flat in tone. For example, Russian or Chinese tends to be quite flat. So if that's you, then you need to practice this quite a lot to try and inject a bit more lightness into your tone. So let's just recap. When we're using polite intonation, we need to avoid a strong, flat, or downward tone, just like that. We need to keep it light. We need to use a full rise tone. Here are some examples with falling intonation. Find me the contact details for APG. It sounds quite rude, quite abrupt. But if we rephrase it using a full rise because we're asking a question, we start off with a higher tone. Could you find me the contact details for APG, please? We're rising at the end because we're asking a question. Could you find me the contact details for APG, please? It sounds much better. The next form is not a question, but a statement means of making a request. And that starts with the little rise on the question part and on the request part, I should say, and the fall on the statement part. So we have, I'd like you to send out the staff survey form today. I'd like you to send out the staff survey form today. Now this is where it starts to get a bit more complicated because sometimes shorter forms are okay for familiar people of equal status. If you think about when you speak to your family, you probably use quite short forms. You don't necessarily use those very polite forms. But as long as you use a light tone, the request sounds acceptable. So for example, if you said, hey, hand me that stapler. It's a short form. We're not saying please. We're not using a modal verb, but the light tone makes it acceptable. If you are a superior and you want to give some very direct instructions to a subordinate, for example, get me the figures for the APG account, then because you're the boss, it's okay to use a short form in certain circumstances. So sometimes we know employees don't always do things in the way that you want. They may have been very slow. They may not have made a very good job, and you may be feeling a little impatient. So you may use that much shorter form. But again, it's not professional to allow emotion to get in the way. We want to try to be neutral. We want to try and keep a good relationship. It's better if we can use good intonation rather than very flat intonation, because flat intonation communicates annoyance. Sometimes you might want to communicate annoyance though. But generally, if we're talking to people that we don't know well, we use longer, more polite forms. And if we're a subordinate addressing a superior, then we definitely need to use longer, more polite forms. And we're going to look at more of this in a future issue of Checking My English magazine. Thank you for watching today, everyone. I hope that you found this helpful, and I'd love to hear if you've got any questions or feedback for me on this. Please get in touch.